Hey everybody, Brian here. We are continuing this series on building a custom build computer for doing music, video, and 3D production, running Windows and Mac. In the previous videos, we've put the CPU and cooler in place. We also put the NVMe cards, 4 of them, as well as our 64 gigabytes of memory in place. And now we are ready to start putting these together into the Fractal Torrent. So let's cut to the case. With the Fractal Torrent, you're going to find certain accessories. 2 fan brackets, a box with a bunch of hardware, cable ties, as well as brackets that are used to help keep a GPU in place. And in the manual, you'll notice they refer to an air cooling tower build. So this is what we'll be doing, which means we're going to keep the fans as they are. If I run into problems later with cooling, I might look into a different configuration, but for now we'll go with that. First step is taking off the side and top panels so that we can have access to the inside of the case. Taking off the sides is fairly easy. You just have to pull outwards and then pull up, and that's it. Of course, it's made of glass, so we'll want to be careful. Otherwise, there probably wouldn't be this sticker here saying glass, handle with care. So here I am handling the glass with care, and we'll do likewise with the other side. Just pull out and up. And now we'll take off the top cover. To remove the top panel, first we unscrew here, as well as on the other side. Now we pull towards us, and then away. Okay, we've just decovered the case, if there is such a verb as decover. And now we're going to install the power supply. So here's our Corsair RM1000X sitting there very precariously on the edge of the case. I wouldn't actually recommend anybody do anything precarious when it comes to building a computer, but in any case, there it is, waiting for us. Now the screws we'll need for it are the only screws that come in a package of 4 with the accessories, with the hardware. So that makes it easy for us to figure out which ones we need. And there's actually only one way this will fit, which is like so. And that takes care of the power supply. Okay, now for the really fun part, we'll put the motherboard into the case very carefully. And the goal is to line up the 9 holes that we're going to connect the motherboard with. Okay, that looks good. The Fractal Torrent manual says there's an I/O shield that comes with the motherboard that you have to put in first, but we don't have to do that with this board. So we now have everything lined up, and we'll proceed to put these screws in. I recommend using a screwdriver that has a magnetic tip, otherwise you're going to find this process to be quite a nightmare. So I believe that's everything on this side. I'll turn it around. Finally have it turned around. Okay, we are finally going to connect the power cables to our RM1000X. You might have a different PSU, but it should have similar connections. So let's get things arranged to get access to what we need. So here are the power cables that will connect initially. We have the ATX power cable. We have a CPU power cable, And there's another CPU power cable. And by the way, with this, you'll want to split it so that you'll be able to connect it as a 4-pin power connector. So we're going to connect one 8-pin CPU power connector, and then we're going to also connect a 4-pin connector. Also, we'll connect the PCIe power connector. That'll make the PCIe bus produce 60 watts of power as opposed to 27 watts without it. That'll be useful for GPUs that require a lot of power, since the PCIe bus will be able to generate additional power. We connect one end of each cable to the PSU. As far as cable management goes, here's how I'm running from the CPU connections into the case. So then we take both of these cables up from underneath, near where they'll connect. Connecting these two power cables to the CPU power requires some pretty serious gymnastics with your hands, so hopefully you're limber. Here we go. So that was the 4-pin connector, now the 8-pin. All right. Now that the gymnastics part of our summer program is over, we do the easy connection. ATX power cable, and then the 6-pin connector from this PCIe cable. And that's it for power for now. So now what we want to do is make sense of the cables coming from various parts of the Fractal Torrent. So right now we're talking about the connect cables for the front I/O. We follow the cables from the top panel downward, where we'll see the power cable. And by the way, this Q connector that comes with the motherboard will be convenient for connecting some of these. And then we have the audio and a reset switch, as well as the cables for USB, regular USB, and USB-C. To make it a little bit easier to connect some of these cables to the motherboard, we'll use the included Asus Q connector. If your motherboard doesn't have this kind of connector, it's not a problem. This just makes it a little bit easier. So we connect the cables that fit with it, so a reset switch, and you need to take note that where the arrow is indicates positive. So we find the reset connections on this side, connect it like so, and then likewise with power, and then the LED connectors, negative and positive. So that's what we have. Now we will run these cables through certain holes in the case to make our work on the other side easier when we connect everything up to the motherboard. So this audio cable, we're gonna run that here. This Q connector, or if you don't have one, your power reset will go through here. This USB cable will go through here. And then this other USB cable, which is for the USB-C connector on the top case panel, go through here. And now we'll turn things around and get these connected. So now on this side, we connect these cables so the audio connects only one way. So you look where you have no pin and then line up on the connector where there's no pin. So we've connected that. Now the Q connector the reset pins on the bottom here, so I just turn this around to make sure those pins are on the bottom. You notice I left these outer two pins disconnected. Those are for connecting an intrusion detection system for the chassis if you want to. And now moving on to USB. Connect the USB-C cable. And then the other USB cable. And that's it for these connections. Okay, now we're finally ready to connect the fans. If we screw this up, well, we can fry our computer, so probably want to get this right. Now on the Fractal Torrent, there are 3 fans on the bottom, 2 on the front. So the Fractal Torrent manual talks about one way to connect all these fans to a single hub, but a lot of people talk about an alternative method that I will instead use. So for now, we're just going to focus on the power cables. So we have 3 power cables here for these 3 fans. The power cables for the larger front fans, those are already routed in the back. And we're not going to talk about the RGB connectors yet. We'll get to that in a bit. For now, it's just about power. So we'll go to the back of the case. Looking at this side of the case, we see the 2 fan power cables for the 2 front fans. We see a power cable that is for powering this fan hub that comes with the case. Now that's powered by SATA power, so we'll also be using another power cable to connect to the PSU. Now, a lot of people suggest not running all of the case fans into this hub. So some people online are talking about how they run the 2 front fans directly to 2 connectors on the motherboard. So that's what we're going to do here. First, we'll connect this power cable. We can run these 2 cables through an opening on the case. We also need to run this to a connection on the case. So I'll free that up. And that there as well. So let's go back to the other side. Once again, we've switched sides, and here's the cable that we pulled over from the other side. This is what we need to plug the hub into, so that the 3 fans on the bottom that are going to be controlled as one unit will report their speed to the motherboard. So we're going to plug that into this fan chassis here. And we also pulled over 2 cables for the 2 front fans, which are not going to go into the Fractal Torrent hub. We're going to directly plug these into these 2 fan headers. They're for chassis fans. That's one. Here's the other one. Now we are going to route the 3 cables for these 3 bottom fans to the other side so that we can connect them to the fan hub. So we'll just remove these wraps and route them here. And go to the other side to connect. All right, now we are ready for the most exciting part of this whole process, which is RGB, which of course stands for really great build, because in 2024 there's no great computer build without RGB lights. So all fans in the Fractal Torrent contain RGB lights, and there's also a light strip on the top. You can add additional light strips. Now we're going to route the 3 cables from these 3 fans to the rear. The 2 cables for these 2 front fans are already back there, and then we're going to connect everything up. Now we are going to daisy chain all 5 of these cables together. So from one end we'll want the female to be untouched, because that will ultimately go back to the motherboard to connect to the RGB header. So knowing that this one will be untouched for now, we go through our daisy chain like this. And I've reapplied these wraps, by the way, these cable wraps, because it's a little easier to control this. So it's a little different than the ordering that the instructions for the case show. The bottom line is, on one end you're going to have a free male connector, and on the other end you're going to have a free female connector. So now we'll go back to the motherboard and connect this. And while we're at it, this is the cable that's going to connect the LED light for the PSU. So this one we're also going to want on the other side of the case. So now we're going to connect to these 2 RGB headers down here. I had to end up rerouting the PSU light strip because it wasn't fitting the way I had it routed initially. So you might have to adjust things depending on your build. But in any case, pretty straightforward. It can only go one way. So plug in one, plug in the other. And we are getting close. Now we're moving on to the GPU support bracket. This will help keep the GPU in a stable position in the case. So we connect these 2 pieces, and then we'll attach a screw to connect them. We won't really tighten it too much because we're going to adjust later. So that was a little tricky, especially if you're going solo, but we're ready now to attach the GPU. This is a Red Devil 6950. It's going to go into the first PCIe slot. Alright, so I finally got the card in. It was kind of tricky. First I didn't realize that it needed to be where these 2 slots are. So I was trying to put it in a little too close to the heatsink. But now it's in place, so we'll hook up the power. To connect the GPU to power, we'll need 2 more PCIe cables. And we'll want to connect the 6-pin to the 2-pin, so it'll basically be just like a typical 8-pin PCIe connector. Now we could connect a third cable just to be on the safe side to make sure that the GPU is never maxed out power-wise, but I only have one more PCIe connection to the PSU, and I might add another GPU, so I'm going to go with 2, but feel free to connect all 3. So here it is. We've built a computer that should be pretty well rigged for music, video, 3D production. Now it's based on Intel 14th Gen, so please in the comments don't say that 15th Gen is coming in a few months. This should be a great computer for years to come. We'll get Windows installed, do some BIOS configuration in the next series. So let's find that power cable and hit the on switch.